Today, I bought the cheapest phone I could find on Amazon, and that is the Redmi 9A by Xiaomi. Now, this phone is not actually sold in America, but it looks like there's some sellers on Amazon that managed to get their hands on them and are selling them in the US market. Now, this guy right here was only $87, but I wonder what we're gonna get for exactly that price tag. For starters, I will tell you, it does not come with the proper charging brick for American outlets. Thankfully, they did send us a little adapter literally taped to the top of the phone to make this phone work with the US plugs that we have here. But that's besides the point. What we really want to know is, are you getting what you pay for when you're paying $87 for a smartphone? Let's find out. So I can tell you right now, $87 for a smartphone, it's kind of hard to tell what exactly you should be expecting in value. This guy does a pretty good job because it's terrible. It is safe to say it is terrible. The camera sucks. The overall software is running Android 11. Actually, in fact, when I first booted up the phone, within the first 10 seconds of it working, it said the launcher could not open or work. And I was thinking to myself, wow, we are off to a great start with this guy right here. But again, it was only $87. I mean, can you really complain? Anyways, so just like your typical smartphones, it does have a forward-facing camera and a back-facing camera. The front-facing camera is only 5 megapixels. The rear-facing camera is only 13 megapixels. Neither one of these take very good photos. Most of them are fuzzy, grainy, feel rather washed out, not much bright colors, even with the HDR mode enabled. But the worst part about it is because of how terrible the photos actually are, when taking AI portrait mode photos, you can't really see the difference between the bokeh in the background and your subject in the foreground. Both of them are blurry, fuzzy, and washed out. It doesn't really look like it has much of a bokeh to it. Typically with your portrait photos, your foreground or your subject is very sharp, rigid, and it looks bright and beautiful. And the background is very washed out and dull, and that's what gives the cool effect that is the bokeh. With this camera, it feels like the whole thing is just blurry, washed out, and gray. One thing that absolutely bothers me about the camera system the most, though, is how slow it takes photos. I swear, even without portrait mode on, taking photos, it feels like there's a 3 to 5 second delay from when you click the button and the photo is actually taken. It is absolutely grueling. But enough about the camera. Again, it was only $87. I mean, there's only so much you can really ask for. It has your typical smartphone build, so right-hand side, you've got your volume rocker on the top, and you've got your sleep-wake button just below that. At the top, there is an auxiliary port, which feels ironically kind of outdated that this phone would even have an auxiliary port, considering most modern-day phones don't really have an auxiliary port. I don't know, that's kind of controversial though. Besides the point, when we go down to the bottom, you do see that there is a loudspeaker on the right side, and in the middle, we have a micro USB charging cord. Now, I have not seen a micro USB charging cord on a phone in good amount of time, so not really sure how I feel about it being on this phone. But again, it was only $87. I don't really know what else to say. I mean, overall, it's not a bad phone. It's just not very good either. In fact, I wouldn't even say it's very good. It's just okay. It's just an okay phone. Booting it up, it had a hard time even operating the operating system right out of the bag. Now, that could also be because of the outdated processor. It does have a Heliotech processor, which is not as common in the US markets as it is in the Asia markets. The only other phones that we've really seen those Heliotech processors in is going to be the Motorola's. And Motorola's definitely aren't the most expensive phones on the market. When I first started this phone up, it took about 5 minutes running its little, this will take a second to set up your phone type deal. It took so long. And overall, this phone is just slow. This poor thing is just so slow. Of course, the display is a 6.5-inch HD display, which isn't terrible. I feel like that should just be the overall takeaway. This phone is not terrible, but it's also not very good. The real question is if you bought this phone for $87, would you be able to compromise everything that makes a phone at a very, very cheap, budgetable price. Like, this sounds terrible because I'm somebody who firmly believes that e-waste is terrible for the environment and we need to be more careful about the things we throw away. But it feels like this phone is the closest thing we get to a disposable smartphone. Like, this little guy, I feel like it could put up with some wear and tear, but it would age terribly. I mean, it's plastic. It feels like it's pretty well built. You could throw it around, knock it off some things, take it to a job site, take photos for something, blah, 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 blah. And 6 months to a year and a half down the line, this guy would be so obsolete and would not be able to run anything anymore because the battery's degraded, the processor is outdated. It just feels like a phone that will not age very well, but will put up a pretty good fight for the next 6 months to a year. Don't ever get it. And I know that sounds terrible for a budgetal phone because people don't exactly have choices when it comes to buying a phone on a budget, but you can get a lot of flagship phones bought renewed for a much better price. Well, not necessarily a much better price, but you get much bigger bang for your buck than you do with this guy right here. I bet you could find a flagship phone close to the $100, $150 range that is renewed, 2 years old, whatever, that would work way better than this guy. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. Long story short, the Redmi 9A, don't get it. It's a terrible idea. This little guy, it can't even run Android right out of the gate.